We like to share a quick word in Parshas Baha'alotcha. Parsha starts off, Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Lemar, Daber L'Aaron v'Amar Ta'ila Baha'alotcha es haneres amol pnei hamenorah yiru shivas haneres. So Rashi says that Baha'alotcha al shem shehalahav Ole, because the flame of the fire goes up. Baha'alotcha and lashon aliyah. It says in the Torah when you light the menorah, a lashon of going up. Shetzarich lahadlik ad shetehei hashalheves Ole me'eleha. That you need to light the menorah until the flame of the fire goes up by itself. So the question is, what does this mean that the shalheves is Ole me'eleha? That's number one. Number two, if you look in the beginning of the Medrash Rabbah starts off Baha'alotcha. Onu meitzim b'harbe mekemes tziva HaKadosh Baruch Hu al haneros v'al adol kosam b'shem hazayis. We find in many places that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitzvah on the neris and to light them b'shem hazayis. V'ata tetzaves b'nei Yisrael v'yikroi lech Hashem hazayis of kosas. That's at the beginning of Parshas Tetzava. V'chein omer al l'menorah tahor yarech es haneros afkan Baha'alotcha haneros. So to over here about Baha'alotcha haneros, and the Mefarshim over here are grappling to try to figure out and understand what's the Medrash coming to teach us. So the Marzu, which is the basic Pirush on Medrash Rabbah, explains like this. So he says, "L'fi mashe kasavnu kan chaser bir leiz inyan amar Medrash kain," but he says that this is really just a partial quote from the Tanchuma. But I think there's more here that we could understand. So we know from the Ramban, and everybody discusses this, that Aaron HaKohen didn't have a chelik in the Nesiim, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, Shalcha Gedolim Shalahem, and that's where the Nes Chanukah comes in, which was done Ali the Kahanim. We know all this kind of Torah. But I want to explain it with the Gemara in Brachas and Daf Yud Zayin. Very fascinating Gemara. The Gemara says like this, Margla b'pumei de Reb Meir. Gemara b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha l'das as drachai, lishgoid al dalsei terasi, nitzar terasi belibcha, v'neged einecha tia yerasai, shmor picha mikol chet, v'taher v'kadesh atzmecha mikol ashma, v'oven v'ni'eya imcha b'chol mokem. So, Reb Meir used to say this. This was a margla b'pumei de Reb Meir. So what does margla b'pumei de Reb Meir mean? So that's a very good question. Rashi learns kipshutai that Davar ze ragil b'fiv. This was something that he always used to say. And Rashi learns like the Sanhedrin, and hu haya omer in Pirkei Avos. The Rav also learns that it was margla b'pumei, that he used to constantly repeat this and say this over. But in the Sefer Mishnahs Chachamim, he learns that margla b'pumei doesn't just mean that it was something that he used to say a lot, but it was something much more than that, and much greater than something that he would normally say. And this is what he says. Shakol makom she'omer lashon zeh, any place that it uses this lashon, nirah shebalirma shenitnu dvarim elu lepiv. These words fell into his mouth and they just came out. Ki hoda amrinan, like the Gemara says later on in Brachas, misha hishkim v'zark pasuk mipiv harei nevuah ktana. If somebody wakes up and there's a pasuk in his mind, there's a pasuk in his mouth, it's me'ena nevuah ktana, it's a small nevuah. V'chein dvarim elu shel Reb Meir, davapumei mergelas behen, and so too these words of Reb Meir, that he would constantly say, Mashma'usan shehem dvarim sheHaKadosh Baruch Hu medaber. These are the words that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was speaking through the mouth of Reb Meir. And l'chara, it makes sense, it's mistaber to learn like this in the Gemara. I mean, the Gemara makes a lot of sense like this. Why? Because what does he say? Gemara b'chol levavcha, learn with all your heart, b'chol nafshecha, l'das es drachai, to know my way, to know Reb Meir's ways or to know Hashem's ways. L'chayra, it's talking about, L'chayra, Meir is saying that you should learn Torah, l'das es drachai, to understand Hashem's ways. Lishgoid al dalsei terasi. Everyone has to learn Reb Meir's Torah? No. Reb Meir is saying that this is a quote, a direct quote, so to speak, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lishgoid al dalsei terasi, and it's our terasi b'libcha. You should protect and watch my Torah in your heart. Again, it's not Reb Meir talking about his personal Torah, it's talking about the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's a similar concept to Misha Hishkim Mizark Pasuk Mipivit to Nevuah Ktana. So it's a very interesting thing. What does this have to do with Reb Meir, with what we're talking about? So the Pnei Menachem and Chanukah explains like this. So we know that this man of lighting the menorah, which again we explained comes from the fact that Aaron HaKohen didn't take part in the Nesiim. So we know that this man for lighting the menorah is Asher Techla Regel Min Hashuk. That there's a certain regilos that a person has, whether it's for good things, whether it's for bad things, but there's a concept of regilus that a person gets used to it. So the Sherim, amongst others, talk about this concept that the point of Hanukkah, the point of the Neiros, were a constant hischachos. A fire is constantly renewing itself. So that's Acha Tichla Regel Menashuk. Ad the Kalya Rigla de Tarmudoi, until the people from Tarmud, which was a place which we're going to talk about in a minute, until they left the Shuk. So Haragil ben Ner is somebody who's Ragil in the Ner HaTorah. The pasuk says, "Chashavti d'rachav ashiva ragli al edei secha," that there's a certain regilus that a person has to have in Torah and in Yerushalayim, and like the Medrash says at the beginning of Parshas Baha'u'llah, the ragli ma'liches esil beis Medrash, he had a certain regilus that his feet. David HaMelech is saying this pasuk, and the Medrash there understands it to mean that there was a certain regilus. He was a certain comfort and a certain default setting that he had, that his feet would always take him to the Beis Medrash. And the Gemara says in Yuma, "Mini raglachem yochef, minei atzmacha menachet shelo yove raglacha li deyichuf shahergilus tehilatav." The Gemara is explaining over there that a person's regilus, what a person's used to, it should be for good things. And this is how he wants to understand what this margla b'pumei de Reb Meir is. That what's the margla b'pumei de Reb Meir? Reb Meir was used to saying this thing. Reb Meir was used to this, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was speaking through him. And that's what we're saying over here. And what are we saying over here? The margla b'pumei de Reb Meir. That what's the dalsei terasi? What are we saying? The dalsei terasi is the door of the house. The door of the house, that's where you put the menorah. That is a mezuzah milyamin and Chanukah mismail, and then when we protect all our openings, so to speak, like the pasuk says, "L'pesach is rebbes." Whenever there's a new opportunity, we always have to be careful to make sure that the Yitzhar doesn't come in over there. So then, once we protect ourselves with the Torah and with the mitzvahs, then we could be certain. When we create a certain regilus for ourselves, a certain comfort level of knowing that this is what we do. We know that we wake up in the morning, we wash nagel vasa, we go to daven. We have a certain system where we have our day set up already, and we know with that's the best way to be able to conquer the Yitzhara. So then the Gemara says that we light the menorah at the kali rigla de Talmudoi. What's the rigla de Talmudoi? So the Gemara says in Yevamos and Daf Yud Zayin that Talmud is a umma shvela b'yoser. That even the Yidden that lived there weren't so kosher, and the reason was because they didn't have this regilus litzad atayv. And the point is that even when a person is Isaac and Masu Matan, he should be mechavin l'shem shemayim, and he's doing it kedei that he should marry off his children to Talmidei Chachamim. And that's really a big nekuda of what's going on over here. I want to take this a step further. Because the Gemara says in Megillah that Yagati Matzasi Tamin. Where does it mean Yagati Matzasi Tamin? A person's miyageh on learning, and then he finds the answer, so to speak. So we believe him. The question is, well, why do we say Yagati Matzasi? What's it got to do with the Mitzvah? But the point is that a person's learning, even if a person's learning, and even if he thinks he's figuring it out, it's really all coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the concept of margla b'pumei de Reb Meir, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was speaking through him. Not only was it just a margla that was me'inin v'uktana and was a margla b'pumei de Reb Meir, but that was the point of shetehei shalheves eila me'elecha, that the Torah and the Kedusha is boiling up and burning up inside him, that it's coming out by itself. It's not pshat that he had to sit down and make a cheshbon and nefesh. Should I go to Shachris today? Should I not? Should I go to Beis Medrash today? Should I not? He's automatically going to be going to the Beis Medrash because it's ragla melicha seisil Beis Medrash, like the Gemara says, like the Medrash says at the beginning of Parshas Baha'u'llah about David HaMelech. And what's very interesting is that we could be weiter medayik in the Lashon HaGemara, that the Gemara says v'lishkoid al dal soisai, to be shaken on the doors of Torah. So what does that mean? So the Goyen learns Kipshutai that every ice in the Torah, every word in the Torah is a door that opens up endless opportunities of Torah, of mitzvahs. We know that Rabbi Kiva would darish in the Kisriya Isis, Mishameis Rabbi Kiva Batal Kavara Torah, because he was darish all the Tagan. But Lishkoid is the pshat that it's constant. Have a shokad lil my Torah is constant, non-stop, continuously learning and learning and learning. Whether we understand it well, whether we don't understand it well, whether we need to work on it to understand it better. So sometimes it could happen that a person has a murder gechidush, he has a murder gechap, and he could understand something, and he has a certain insight. And sometimes he's not zeichet to such siyata d'shmaya in his learning. But the point is that if he's lishkar al dalsei teirasi, then he's constantly being Isaac B'Torah properly. So then the Rambam writes in a place that sometimes a person can have such a gewaldige insight, but then sometimes he loses his madrega, so to speak, where he's not getting such siyata d'shmaya in his learning. But the way to get that madrega back is by constantly pushing and pushing and pushing and learning more. And meaning, even if at times he's going to have a chalisha sadas, but if he's going to be sheket al dal seisai, because the door is what's blocking his opportunities. He needs to open the door to create new opportunities. So he needs to be mishtadel to understand even more and to try to open all the doors of Torah, of understanding, and that's why he has to do it every day. Because sometimes the door is just going to swing open in front of you, and you're going to have a gewaldig opportunity and gewaldig siyata d'shmaya. I just want to continue one last thing. We make a bracha every morning. What's the connection between the two brachas, or the one bracha? What's the hemshech of the brachas over here? So the Goin learns in the Siddur that the pshat is because as soon as we open our eyes, the Tzahar is already there. He's already there waiting for us. And then we say, so as soon as Hashem takes the sleep away from us, as soon as we wake up, the first thing that we ask for should be that we should be able to be rugel in Torah. Again, the same lashon as the Gemara over here. We should be rugel in Torah, because if we're rugel in Torah, that's the best way to subdue the Yetzer Hara. But I had a very interesting ha'ara, because the Gemara says in Brachas on Daf Hey, Ein uf el Torah shenemar hasoif einecha b'ay ve'einanu. If a person who blinks his eye, he could lose his Torah at the blink of an eye. The same way a person could have a tremendous siyata d'shmaya that a chiddush should just land on his lap, so to speak, a person could lose a madrega in learning because of even a small thing. So that's hasoif einecha b'ay ve'einanu. But then I thought of a very interesting point, because let's say in Parshas Tazria Mitzara, when the Torah is talking about Saras, so the Torah uses the terms like Yirak or Adamdam, or like the Gemara says, Esther Yirak Reikes Haya. Why can't you just say Esther Yarek Haya? What's Yirak Reikes? So whenever there's a double lashon, it's coming to strengthen the point, coming to bring out the idea even more. Adamdam, it's very red. Yirak, it's very green. So what's Af Apoy? It's Ein Uf Elotira, Af Apoy. Two ufs. What's two ufs? What does this mean? So the Gemara says in Megillah and Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis that really, when a person writes a Sefer Torah or a Megillah, it has to be Mitei Haksav. He has to copy it directly from a previously written Sefer Torah. But Rameir was one time in a place and he needed a Megillah and he didn't have a Megillah. So what happened? So Rameir wrote the entire Megillah from memory. In fact, the Gemara, how could he do such a thing? You need to copy Mitei Haksav. So like the Gemara on Rameir, we could say that Rameir had the Torah always in front of his eyes. That's weiter on what we're talking about over here, that it's margla b'pumei de Rameir. And that's weiter, hamav v'sheinu me'eino yusnuma me'af apoy, ein uf el Torah, that the pshat is that the Torah should always be in front of your eyes from the second that you wake up. And that's what we're asking by hamav v'sheinu. And that's why we're asking right away of hamav v'sheinu me'eino yusnuma me'af apoy, that the uf of the Torah, the af apoy of the Torah, that our eyes should constantly be looking at the Torah. That's the double lashon. That ain't uf el Torah, that we should be zeichet to a lot of Torah, not just to a little bit of Torah. Yeah, Hashem give us Torah. No, we're asking for a lot of Torah, not just a lot of Torah, but a lot of Torah with siyata d'shmaya. They should bench everybody, that we should take be zeichet to grace and madrigs and Torah with tremendous siyata d'shmaya. Hatzlach Rabbah.